all these games, are great to win, but really all that matters is getting to championship weekend.
To the end zone, and it's caught! Are you
A season is a long time. It takes a lot out of you, and you got to put a lot into it.
What a play!
If you have that grit and that desire to win and be something great, that's the only way you're actually going to achieve it.
Welcome back. It's Swing Pass. I'm Adam Ruffner, and I'm joined as always by Evan Lepler. We have 13 weeks of regular season data accumulated and behind us, and Evan, kind of feels like it means nothing. We've got 12 teams remaining, 11 games, one champion to determine, and in the single elimination playoff schedule and the way that this 2025 season has shaken out, it really feels like it's anyone's game at this point. I mean, I know some teams have kind of upward trending arrows versus downward trending arrows. New York is on a 4-game winning streak. Salt Lake is on an 11-game winning streak. We have undefeated Chicago. And yet, as we've been saying for weeks now, it kind of feels like there's still 10 or so teams that are in the hunt for a title in 2025. And it feels like we've got the best Frisbee in front of us.
Yeah, I was just thinking, it's funny you said 10. I was just thinking, how many teams do I think can win the championship? I think all three teams in the East
We've been swimming around
could win
10.
it. I think all three teams in the West could win it in the right situation. Central, I'd say 2 out of 3. South, I'd say 1 out of 3. But that doesn't mean that one makes it a championship weekend, as we have seen in the past. So, 3-3, 2-1. I got 9 out of 12 that I believe could win the championship. And yeah, we've had playoff years where multiple 1 seeds have lost. I mean, that happened last year with Atlanta and Salt Lake losing at home by a single goal on back-to-back nights. Various levels of shock on those 2 nights. What a weekend that was for divisional finals. And yeah, I mean, the first round of the playoffs, it's interesting because, look, making the playoffs is a big deal. Just getting into the tournament matters. And you are a playoff team, and you have a chance. And you are half of the league still playing. But being in the final 8 is a very different feel than being in the 12. We talk about quarters in Ultimate, quarterfinals. And we don't really use that term as much. We call them the divisional championship games. But, being a part of the de facto quarterfinals, you feel like you are right there, right on the cusp of championship weekend. And if you make it to championship weekend and things go your way, you're right on the cusp of a championship. So yeah, I'm more excited for these first round games than I thought I would be in a weird way. Just the way the matchups have worked out. I feel like, all 4 games are kind of rivalry. I mean, obviously DC, New York, Colorado, Oakland have had some spicy games, but Madison, Minnesota, it's been a long time since the Radicals have beaten the Wind Chill. However, someone wrote this, and I don't know if it was you or Ryan Baker or someone, but the Radicals are, I think, 8-1 or 9-1 all time in Central Division playoff games, which is a little bit of a loaded stat, but it's still a stat. And
when did those 8 wins Austin, come from?
Last decade.
Yeah.
And one last year, double overtime. But, San Diego, Austin was also one of the sneaky great games of the regular season with, Austin showing something on the second day of a back-to-back, coming from behind. They were down by 5 in the first half of that game, and they won by multiple goals going away. So there's a lot of intrigue there. And, yeah, I'm really excited for all 4 games. I think all 4 games could go either way. I mean, I'd be really surprised if Madison beat Minnesota, and yet I have seen Minnesota be inconsistent enough times that, I think this Radicals team, which is showing something offensively better than they have in the past, could give the Wind Chill an interesting game, and it's going to be a great crowd at Seafoam Stadium. So, yeah, really excited for the weekend and curious to get your kind of cursory thoughts on the opening round.
Well, let's just set up the slate real quick. So we've got this Super Saturday of first-round matchups coming up on July 26th on Watch UFA TV, starting with the Central and the East. Madison at Minnesota in the Central, playing at Seafoam Stadium, as you just mentioned, where the Minnesota team has sold out 3 consecutive home games, setting new attendance record bars. And I think that they're going to do it for a 4th in a row, it sounds like, this coming Saturday with all the anticipation for the reigning champions to go on another deep playoff run. And then in the East Division, we've got what we've anointed as the best rivalry in the league between New York and DC as this first round playoff teaser, essentially. You know, these two teams have met in multiple East Division championship games, with New York always prevailing in this rivalry in postseason situations. And yet DC playing at home, and with the way that they beat them earlier in the season, it feels like DC is a favorite, and yet New York's won 4 in a row. They sort of seem like this sleeping giant that's woken up. Jack Williams is healthy and playing like playoff Jack. They just added Ben Dameron, who in his New York debut this last weekend looked excellent on this offense. They're still top 5 in success rate. And as we've kind of been teasing for a couple of weeks, New York is just one of those teams where, given their pedigree, given their top-end talent, and given the way that this youth is elevatedly playing in 2025, you don't want to face them right now. You do not want to encounter this Empire team in a single game elimination format. And so I think, we get these two matchups right away to start Saturday. And then in the South Division, you've got San Diego at Austin, and then rounding out the night, Colorado at Oakland in the West. So, yeah, I mean, I think other than New York, DC, the Madison, Minnesota is maybe the most thought about rivalry. And so with Minnesota's domination in recent years, that feels like it might not deserve as much hype. But to me, all 4 of these games have a lot of intrigue. And I feel like we should probably start with, though, at the top in the East with New York, DC. I mean, that's just that's the steak at the center of the platter, right?
I mean, no question. It is the game of the weekend in my mind. It is two teams that just measure themselves, not just against each other, but measure themselves against the champion. And, these two teams have won every East Division since 2018, which is kind of a long time ago now. And DC finally got over the hump last year, but fell flat at championship weekend. That has been pushing them for a long time. One thing that I find interesting about DC, when I was in DC for the first New York game, Friday Night Frisbee, June 7th, I believe, the Breeze were missing some guys, and it was kind of a youth movement-y kind of day with, Ben Greenberg and Kobe Loveranis and Michael Wagner, and Aiden Downey made his debut that night, and most of those guys have worked their way into their top 20. Of the guys I just mentioned, Wagner is the only guy that's not slated to play. But we've talked a lot about how that's kind of a new era for the Empire with all the pieces that they've brought in. But it's also, in many ways, a new era for the Breeze. I mean, obviously, they lose Johnny Malks, who was their pivot handler for so long. They get Christian Boxley back, who took last year off. They get Alexandre Fall back and Moussa Jah back as well. And they still have the core. I mean, just like the Empire, they have the core that was playing East Division finals against New York throughout the past 6-7 years. But there's also this young churn, from A.J. Merriman, who I think is in his 4th or 5th year now, to Miles Grovic. Isaac Lee has worked his way into a top 20 spot. DC has a different group of young energy. And I think, I don't know if we've talked about that enough this year, quite frankly. Because the mainstays are so solid, and the disc movers are primarily the mainstays. Rowan, Thomas Edmonds, Andrew Roy, Cole Jurek, Christian Boxley, David Bloodgood, etc. But the complementary pieces, the X factors, if you want to call it, are new. Now, that also means this is a new opportunity for them, because playoff Frisbee in the UFA is different from regular season Frisbee. There's a different level of pressure. So that's one thing I'll be curious to see in this game, is how DC's young guys handle that pressure. And you could say the same thing about the Empire, because they have a lot of guys who haven't been in a DC New York playoff game before either.
Yeah. And to me, it does, though, come back to those sort of central figures on both teams. I mean, you mentioned the DC core, and on the flip side for New York, I mentioned Williams, but Ben Yacht is having one of my favorite seasons of his professional career. It just feels like he's efficient everywhere in the field with what he's doing, and he just has a toolkit at this point where he can kind of conquer any individual one-on-one. He may have lost, half a step. He may lack some of the explosive highlights of years past, but I mean, the tip drill buzzer beater, to end the third quarter against Boston, the way he just continually puts pressure over the top with his size and his length and his playmaking. I mean, again, as I mentioned on a recent episode, if you're just drafting guys, it still feels like Ben Yacht is one of the team builders that you can really build stuff around. And I just think like New York is coming on so strong. I think you bring up a terrific point. How can this sort of reformatted, 10 to 20 in the lineup of DC play against a New York team that seems to be finding more and more of its identity as the weeks progress?
Can we draft guys? Can we go through the 20-man rosters and like each select 5 guys just to see where the top players in our minds fall?
Sure, yeah.
I'll give you
For
the
DC, New York.
I'll give you the DC New York. I'll give you the first pick. If you could have any player that's currently active, let's call Cole Jurek and Gus Norbaum active, but they're currently questionable. You get the first pick. Who do you think is the number one guy that you would want from either of these two teams for this game?
Oh my gosh, that's a hard question. I mean, my heart says Jack Williams. It's a playoff game. It just feels weird to go away from that. But as we talk about more and more, I think the fulcrum of this Empire team in 2025 is probably number 34. So I think John Randolph right now. I think just looking at these lineups side by side. Ooh, I'm sorry. Christian Boxley's active. Christian Boxley, number 1. Sorry. Christian Boxley, number 1, and then JR, number 2.
I said take one player.
I know.
You get to
I
draft
hear you.
one.
I know. Boxley, number 1. I'll take Boxley.
So it would have been a really tough. I was thinking JR, so I'll take JR number 2. But
Okay.
if you had taken JR, the choice between Boxley and Williams would have been really tough. Like in some ways, like for a single game in the playoffs, like Jack's throws and his experience, and Boxley is really good and dynamic, but I feel like Jack is going to be involved in everything in this game. And I don't want to like say that there's a chance Boxley could be quiet, but like, he's not necessarily the same take over the game type guy, even though he's capable of it, if you understand my hedging.
Yeah, and I think what's hard about even drafting single snake style, almost like a fantasy draft, is that sort of discludes what the Breeze system is, which is sort of 2 to 3 man pairings. You think about like how Boxley succeeds on the field. It's often in concert with Tyler Monroe and like an Aiden Downey upfield, and so it's difficult for me to say like, yeah, Boxley's just going to dominate as a star right out of the gate in a way we would see, impactfully shown up on a stat sheet or something. But like, he's the best player in this game when he's feeling it. And so, you got to kind of go with him. But, JR, to your point, I think if you're watching a game progress out, I mean, look at his last 5 games. I don't have his stats quite pulled up in front of me. Give me one moment. But the dude's on an absolute tear of late. He had 4 assists, 4 goals against Boston, 40 of 42 from the field. 2 games ago against Toronto, 8 assists, 38 of 39 plus 10. I mean, we've talked about it for years. When JR gets a central role on this Empire team, as he is in his 4th season with New York, he's going to look like an MVP player. And lo and behold, 2025 happens, and it's like, I want to draft him at the top of my fantasy team.
Well, I took him with my second pick. We're not doing snake. You got the third pick. Are you taking Jack?
I think so. I got to take Jack off the board. I can't let you have him.
Okay. Let me tell you where my mind is at. I mean,
All right.
Yacht is a candidate.
Uh-huh.
Thomas Edmonds is a candidate.
He sure is.
Miles Grovick is a candidate. Jacques Nissen is a candidate.
I
And
feel like I feel like Grovick is a really good area to circle on because you brought him up before. He's been such a dynamic player when he's been in the lineup, even with an injured wing. And yet it's like the biggest ceiling and the lowest floor to me with him, in this matchup. Like he could be the difference maker that pushes DC over the top, or he could have a little bit of a quiet game, just sort of shutting someone else down.
yeah, I mean that's life on the D line, right? Like you could
Yeah,
have a
yeah,
pretty quiet game and play pretty well.
yeah.
Um, because I know that there are so. I mean, I'm not like thinking about this in terms of building a team, but I think Miles is the best individual one-on-one lockdown and in the air playmaker among the non-Giants. And I'm kind of, I mean, I don't know if I'm just trying to
Does
be
Brownlee
cheeky.
does Brownlee qualify as a Giant? Because that's a world player right there. And I know we haven't seen him in every game like we usually do for the Empire
Yeah,
in 2025, but yeah, I'm asking because I think Grovick deserves some discussion there because he's been that good in the air.
yeah. I mean, Marquez might have been the next player like I would have named after the four that I named. But you know what? I'm going to take Thomas Edmonds. Versatility,
Yeah,
experience, steadiness. He's a gamer. So Edmonds is my second pick, fourth overall. Who you taking fifth?
yeah. You mentioned the versatility. I feel like I gotta get someone that can kind of provide a little bit of physicality or some kind of defensive dimension alongside Boxley and Williams. I'm looking at Brownlee, man. I just think that we haven't been as exposed to him this season and the kind of impact he can have, but we have seen it at times. I know Vegas isn't necessarily the greatest template to express how good Marquez Brownlee is, but when he can kind of be that galvanizing figure on the Empire counterattack, and especially with how young and I think how much camaraderie exists on that D line, I think he could be similar to Grovick, somebody who we're talking about, after the game on Saturday night of Marquez kind of won this game for New York. So that's sort of where my mind circles at with him, his impact as a puller. Yeah, I'm taking Brownlee. So yeah, we're
Okay.
going Boxley with the one pick, Jack, and then Brownlee. I like that. That just feels good as far as like last names you got to look at on a starting lineup.
All right. Something that I just thought about is going to make me pull the trigger on Ben Yacht.
Uh
The
huh.
last time that New York was in a playoff game against DC, Ben Yacht's stat line: 8 goals, 3 assists, 637 or 687 receiving yards, which I think was the most all time when it happened.
It
And
was.
remember, that was the game that Jeff Babbitt and John Lithia were both scratched right before. Yacht had been playing D line most of the year. He had not played any O points in the regular season finale, then 25 O points in that playoff game where the Empire had like the fewest turnovers in a four-quarter game ever. So, yeah, part of the thought is I don't know if DC has an answer for him. They definitely have more size than they used to. Fred Farah is healthy. Ben Greenberg's got size. Grovick plays big. But yeah, give me Yacht. So I got Randolph, Edmonds, Yacht. You've got Boxley, Brownlee, and
Williams.
who else
So
you take?
four of six
Yeah, oh,
play.
Jack. Yeah.
So 4 of 6 players so far in New York. Our hypothesis is kind of testing correctly here. So it's my pick up next. Let me look. Oh, you haven't taken Grovick? I'm taking Grovick. I'm putting Grovick on Yacht. We're getting that matchup for a playoff game. I hope that happens on Saturday, by the way. I feel like it will. I feel like that's going to be some clutch time, deep balls going up for those two.
Oh, great.
But I'll take Grovic for
I'll
my
take,
second to last pick.
again, we're not building a team, but if we were, bringing John Randolph and Jacques Nissen back together is really exciting for me. So I'll take Jacques and
I would
take those
actually.
Brown guys.
It's not going to be exciting for the viewers at home. It's going to be handoff ball back and forth. I mean, I don't know how we're going to disrupt that. I mean, Brownlee is a good handler defender, but that's going to be an attrition getting the ball from those two. All right, final pick?
Yeah, we each got one more.
All right. Nissen's off the board. Oof, this is a tough one. You know, I look at names like, obviously, A.J. Merriman, but like a Matt LeBar, who has been playing so well for the Empire offense. You know what? Is Dameron even active yet? I don't
He's
see
not.
Dameron in the line. Okay. That changes some things for me. Oof. Like Rowan, Andrew Roy, Tyler Monroe. Oh, man. You know what? I'm going with the Callahan winner. Let's put Aiden Downey on this team, too. Give us another thrower.
I thought he was going to drop to me. I wanted Aiden Downey.
Nope. That's my specialty in fantasy draft 7. I just don't talk about the dude who I actually want. So Aiden Downey's coming off the board. So what do I got? I got Aiden Downey. We've got Christian Boxley, Marquez Brownlee, Jack Williams, and who am I forgetting here? Miles Grovic. Oh, I could go to war with that team. Yeah, that's a good 5. All right, who's your last pick?
So I think my last pick is a member of the DC Breeze, which means that while New York was 4 of our first 6 players drafted, we've gone to DC side of things, and it's going to be DC 6 out of 10, if I'm thinking correctly.
Playing against ourselves here, Evan.
Yeah, I think I would take A.J. Merriman, and here's why. I have been impressed with AJ on offense as this year has gone along. I know he admitted to me that he struggled a little bit with the new disc early in the year. I mean, he had five throwaways in their first 2 games of the year. He's only had 6 throwaways in their last 10 games. He's played more offense. The game at Boston, which is what I'm thinking of, he played 12 O points, 8 D points. So, yeah, my team's about versatility, Adam. We got JR, who's played both ways, Jacques Nissen, who's played both ways, Thomas Edmonds, who's played both ways, Ben Yacht, who's played both ways, and A.J. Merriman, who can play both O and D. So, whether we're pulling or receiving, my 5 is good. This is a fun exercise. I would love to see this 5-on-5 game. Who says no?
I want to see the 7-on-7 game, and I as much fun as that is, I do think we should probably move on away from Empire Breeze. Other than to say, what would you set the line at for this coming Saturday?
DC 1.5. DC by 1.5.
That feels about right. I don't know if I would take them to cover.
and what I was just going to say after that, like either 1.5 or 2.5. Like DC did beat New York by 8, and DC led by 1 with a scoreboard at all zeros in overtime. So I think, and the Breeze are at home. I think you have to throw out the result from last week. I'm trying not to put any stock into them getting beaten down by Philly. But yeah, I think it's a really close game, and as I wrote in the toss, overtime would not surprise me at all. I do think, there's a world where DC wins this game by 5. DC swept New York last year. DC was so close to sweeping New York again this year. The 8-goal loss they handed the Empire was New York's biggest loss since the 2018 regular season, when they lost by 10 a week before winning the monsoon and turning the franchise around, which is to say, New York doesn't lose by 8. And now also that game at DC, was when Oliver Chartok got hurt the first point. Calvin Brown got hurt during the week and didn't play. Calvin's obviously out for this game as well. But yeah, the one guy we didn't mention who's going to be a factor if healthy is Cole Jurek. Like, he could be the
Oh,
best player in this
absolutely.
game. If he's
Yeah.
good to go, he could be the game changer that puts the DC Breeze over the top. And, I also just like a lot of DC's, Alexon Fall and Jasper Tom, we didn't even mention, but those guys are gamers. David Bloodgood, same story. New York's young defenders that are making plays. Are you expecting like a Klon and Lehman and Yarder to Jonas? If New York's going to keep it close and get breaks, those are going to be some of the guys that they're leaning on.
Yeah, that is going to be what the game comes down to, right? Is can this New York defense, which has been playing so up over the last month of the season, can they continue to get the kind of blocks and I think transition turnovers that they were lacking during their struggles earlier in the year? And I don't know against this DC team that's going to have an active Boxley and possibly also Jurek available in the starting lineup. Because if those two guys are, 1 and 2 as kind of the cutting pair that sets up everything for DC, I just, I don't think Antoine Davis has been at the same level that we're used to seeing for a former defensive player of the year. He's had moments in 2025, but I just think they have a tough time addressing the sort of consistent efficiency that this Breeze offense can put out. Because again, they're playing generally like a top 5 team in the league. I agree with you. I think the Week 13 result was much more about Philly and their kind of successful season than it was about a judgment of a Breeze team that was kind of playing open lines and very visibly not aggressive on defense. But this DC team is one of the best teams in the league. And I think that for all the momentum that New York has built over the past month, they still have kind of matchup issues up and down the roster against the Breeze.
Can I ask you one more difficult question before we move on?
Please.
If you could pick either coaching staff, Nunez and Stevens or
Oh,
Boyle and her crew, which one would you choose to lead your team in this game?
I think in 2025, New York has to be one of the 3 to 5 most impressive coaching staffs for how they've kept everything together, for how they've set a focus and sort of like reoriented it as new variables come up throughout the season. Similar to almost like an Austin or a Minnesota, even after losses, they'll respond with quotes to you in the Tuesday toss each week, kind of resetting what the focus needs to be. And I just think that that's so important for a good competitive team. And I think, it's the fruits of their labor for the Empire that they're on this 4-game winning streak because, yeah, Nunez and Stevens have just done such a good job of establishing the message, putting everyone in roles that they know what to expect, and kind of enduring what, sports teach us, which is that you're going to lose sometimes. And I think New York has been so categorically allergic to it for half of a decade that it's come at them, in bunches. And it's been really impressive to watch them weather that storm and start to come out this other side with this still intact championship core and all these young guys that are figuring out, hey, we can really play up in this environment. We can really do some things on this team because, we came in with a lot of hype in 2025, I think, for New York. And while they've not been an unsuccessful story, they've endured their trepidation and their trials. And I think, again, it's such a testament to this coaching staff that they're still here. They're still battling. We have another 7-5 team that made the playoffs for 7 or 10 straight years in Carolina that finished the season on a 7-1 run. They're sitting at home, Good of a job as Michael Avila did correcting some of their early season mistakes. Wasn't enough. So,
Yeah.
hats off to New York for weathering the East Division gauntlet too. Pulling out some of those tough midseason wins when they didn't look right. That's a big win for the New York coaching staff.
And part of what I think about when I think about leadership and preparing your team is like All right, you've gotten punched in the face. You've been broken 3 times in a row in the first quarter. It's 5-2. Like, what do you say? How do you respond? What adjustments do you make in the heat of the moment? Um, and I agree with you. I mean, I got a lot of respect for Lauren Boyle and her staff, Thomas Owen and Jimmy
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
Xavier. But I lean Nunez and Stevens for their experience in this league in big games. And yeah, part of me thinks like, this New York team is 3-5. It's not gravy that they're in the playoffs on a 4-game winning streak, but like, you know, Ben Yacht talked about it really insightfully on the interview with Dan Hilton and Keith Rayner after the Boston game on Saturday. He's
Great
like,
interview. Great interview, by the way.
yeah, he's like, we're not the hunted anymore. Like, we get to do the hunting. We just get to play Frisbee and have fun. And I think this DC team, like, if they're experiencing some first quarter adversity, could look around at each other and be like, I can't believe this is happening again against New York. Like, after all we've done, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah. Now, I think I'm leaning toward DC in the game, but it's obviously going to be close. And I will be broadcasting the Minnesota Madison game as this game goes along, but you better believe it'll be on the iPad in the booth, and I will be multitasking at my best, hopefully, keeping tabs on both these games because, yeah, DC New York, it's as good of a rivalry as we've got in this league, and it's going to be a fun next chapter.
Absolutely. But we've got 3 other games on Saturday to cover, so let's continue on. You just mentioned in a moment ago the Central Division matchup between Madison and Minnesota at the same time slot at 6 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. or
7 Eastern,
7 p.m. Eastern.
7 Eastern, 6 Central.
Yep. Thank you. Madison at Minnesota. This is, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, a matchup that Minnesota has dominated, specifically at Seafoam over the last several seasons, even going back to the beginning days when Madison was getting, 12, 13 regular season wins against other divisional opponents. They would endure a loss or two against Minnesota just because there's something stylistically with the way that the wind chill play the Radicals that puts them just a nudge above. I'm sure you have the all-time record stat in your research. Have you pulled that up yet?
I'd have. Minnesota has won 13 of the last 14, and Madison leads the all-time series 19-17. So it could be
Isn't that
1918
something?
if Minnesota. Yeah. So I mean that's how one-sided it was last decade, and that's how one-sided it's been this decade, and it all changed on that fateful June night as we returned from the pandemic when it looked like Madison had the game locked up, and not quite.
Not quite indeed. Brian Vanuka getting that hand block with 2 seconds left. A bit of a contention around the timeout that preserved the regulation clock at 2 seconds. And then
Right.
rookie Andrew Roy scoring the game-tying goal, sending it to overtime. Minnesota had all the momentum. And yeah, that's what sparked this run of kind of 13 out of 14. Now, I think that actually began slightly before the pandemic, correct? Because there was the 2019 game, the first ever time
Right.
Wind chill won at Breeze Stevens Field.
That was the Josh Potterack block game, yeah.
Oh man, all-time block. I mean, right up there with the Mark Lloyd 2014 Rochester block for those over-the-shoulder, no physicality blocks. But yeah, I mean, getting back to this matchup and this rivalry, these two teams have flipped it, and I feel like going into Saturday, Madison still has the internal belief, and like you mentioned in the earlier in the episode, some retooled offensive pieces with Eric Sjostrom and Kainoa Chunmoy stepping onto the O-line that have them thinking that they can now retake this series, extend their all-time lead. But I still favor Wind Chill pretty heavily in this. It still feels like this is very much a reigning champs game to lose at home with the way that they play at Seafoam Stadium.
Well, let me ask you this, as the voice of the Radicals on WatchUFA.tv, who has watched them a ton. We're not going to do the draft, but if we did, is there anybody other than Anthony Gutowski that you would take among the top 10 selections over 9 or 10 guys from the wind chill?
It's tough, right? I mean, I think maybe Chun Moy for the way that he's been playing on both sides of the ball this year. I mean, you talk about a versatile player. It's been 2025 Chun Moy in his first season back in Madison. But yeah, I mean, it is that kind of talent disparity, I feel like, at the top of these rosters. And that sort of speaks to how this matchup has played out the last couple of years. You know, Radicals are still a wildly young team. It still feels like they're in developmental mode. And so they're just a little bit behind the ball against a franchise that's still, you know, defending its title. I mean, this wind chill team still believes it's the best team in the league. Absolutely. They have, you know, taken every single of these 3 losses in 2025 with difficulty. They learned a lesson, you know, again, hard in Salt Lake last Friday, and they're going to have a chip on their shoulder going into the postseason. And that's just, again, it's bad math for a Radicals team that kind of needs breaks to go its way to beat the 2 Titans at the head of the Central Division. You know, they played well on Sunday against Chicago for 3 quarters, but again, a little bit of an offensive lull, a little bit of inconsistency, and that Chicago defense just punished them. And it's been a similar story against Minnesota. And I just, with there being this new implementation of offensive talent in a semi-new system mid-season, there's going to be some misfirings. And against Minnesota on the road, it's just, it's tough, right? Like it's a tight walk for the Radicals in this environment. And we haven't seen it yet.
In the first quarter on Sunday, Madison against Chicago, when Madison began the game 3-0, what were you thinking kind of underneath your public broadcasting persona? Like, were you thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to happen? Or is Chicago just going to fold, or they're not going to play? Or were you like, this is going to turn pretty quick?
I think one of the fundamental lessons I relearned every single year is that 4 quarters is a lot of ultimate. It's a long game. And that 3-0, while really exciting, emphatic with the home crowd behind it, it felt a little bit like vapors. It felt a little bit like an illusion. Because, again, like, De Marrée hadn't really gotten into rhythm. Chicago, you know, is supremely talented and still working through their offensive kinks. It just felt like once the Union got themselves grounded, they were going to take off. And that's exactly what happened. And, you know, Madison is a team that plays really well together, but they again, as you mentioned moments ago around like possibly fantasy drafting these rosters, they lack a little bit of that star power. They lack somebody who can just kind of take over for them. You know, Radicals would have a good play. There'd be a bunch of excitement. Chicago would trot onto the field and De Marrée would just bomb an 80-yarder in stride, or they'd do something in immediate response, and it would just wipe everything the Radicals did away.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Is this a good time for a quick 2-3 minute Daan De Marrée sidebar? Because you said something to me. You said something in the Slack that was like that really made me say, "Wow!" Because you've watched a lot of Ultimate in this league. You've been to a million games. You watch so much film, and you said something.
I'm still one person.
I know.
Only one guy's opinion.
Are you comfortable sharing with the world what you said to me in the Slack?
Sure. I don't have a crush on him or anything. Maybe, but who knows?
Let's be honest. Yes, you do.
A little bit.
Do you want me to repeat it, or do you want to say it?
Yeah. Why? You sound like you have it up. So why don't you?
I don't have it exactly, but you said basically that Daan De Marrée is the best player you've ever watched in person in the Ultimate Frisbee Association. After
in this format, for what pro requires you to do on the expanded field size, for the kind of stamina it requires, again, over 4 quarters, the sort of completeness to his game, the way in which I've watched Madison over the years kind of always stymie individual stars in a way, other than the greats, you know, other than the Nethercuts, the Joys, the DiGirolamos way back in the day. They always have a way to sort of like de-emphasize a star, make them, play their plan B game. And with De Marrée, it was just like, just clear out and let him get open. I mean, there was no way to address him. If he trails a play, he's going to be the thrower. That's not what you want. If he's leading a play, he's the best receiver in the league. That's not what you want. He's going to make a play, getting the block. He almost just single-handedly added another break at the end of the third quarter when he came out of nowhere on the backside, picked a pass off, and tried to get it in the end zone before the buzzer sounded. But it's just he continues to rally. There's no off points. There's no off cuts. He enjoys all of the minutia. He enjoys grinding people out. There's a true specialness to the way that everything goes together with him, and the way that it's just relentless. It's just always. It's again, Madison takes that 3-0 lead, and you forget about it by the time the end of the third quarter ends because he's got like 10 total scores, almost 600 total yards, and there's still 12 minutes left to play on the clock. It's silly stuff, man.
He's 24 years old. In his first year playing pro with this rule set, this disc, this field. And his last 4 games, he's got 41 scores, 11 blocks with 3 throwaways, double-digit plus-minuses, 4 straight. I searched through all the top plus-minus guys for each season going back to 2013, 2014 when we started to have game-by-game data. I could not find another example of someone with 4 consecutive double-digit plus-minus games. It doesn't mean it hasn't happened, but I know of no precedent for it. And yeah, it's a pretty incredible run. You asked me in the Slack, like, what's the argument against his MVP candidacy right now? And the only thing, strength of schedule. Now, that's about to change because he's probably going to play Minnesota or Madison, but probably Minnesota, and then championship weekend. And championship weekend is going to be important for De Marrée's MVP case, but I think he's definitely the favorite right now, and it's pretty incredible. By the way, be honest, did you know the answer to the trivia question I asked at the top of part 2 of Tuesday's Toss?
What was it? Scoring leader and blocks leader on the same team?
No. Led their 3 players in the league led their team in both goals and assists in the regular season.
And assists. I think I could have gotten De Marrée and DeCron, but I don't know if I would have gotten the third.
Do you remember who it is now?
Is it Felton?
How closely do you edit these things? No, it's not Felton.
You have 5,000 words in these things.
At least.
I write too.
I know.
Who was the third? It's slipping my mind.
West Coast?
Jonathan Lyle.
Nope.
I'm off. Before I pull it up, just tell me.
Seattle's Garrett Martin.
Garrett Martin.
Is
that should have been easy. That should have been easy.
But it says something that, the 2 guys that led their team in both goals and assists and made the playoffs are these 2 dudes who are 24 and 21 respectively from Belgium. Just take a second and think about that and how good these guys are and how special it is that they have come across the world to dominate in our league and to lead their teams to top seeds in the playoffs. And hopefully we're going to get a De Marrée, DeCrona semifinal matchup. That would be super fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or championship matchup for that matter.
And again, I think what also separates them, in addition to the wild statistical production, is their competitiveness. Both those dudes are just dogs. It's very apparent anytime you see them that they want it all the time, anything. They strike me as the kind of guys who everything's a competition. Anything you can do, I can do better, sort of thing. Where it's just they want it. They want that disc every possession. They want to beat you to the spot. They want to make the better highlight. And so when they go head to head, I feel like that could be something special. But Chicago isn't playing this weekend. Chicago isn't playing this coming weekend.
Yeah. Let me say one more thing about it. I did not
Sure.
quote Jake Rubin Miller his entire thing, but he told me this as well. He said, in practice when he's on D and De Marré's on O, he's guarded him a few times, and he said he told Don that I feel like as bad of a defender, I feel like a really bad defender when I'm guarding him, and he told that to Don, and Don chuckled and was like, "Yeah, I'm trying really hard." Which Jake Rubin Miller says he got a kick out of because it's the relentless effort, it's the relentless energy. Like just those two guys don't get tired. The way they train, the way they fight, the way they battle, it's different. I mean, DeCrana said that to me one time, maybe last year when he was with Montreal. He's like, I know I have worked harder than the guy guarding me. It's the Cam Brock mentality, quite frankly, and it's done pretty well for Cam through the years. And I feel like Toba and Bo Kittredge as well. We need to be respectful of Bo and all of his MVPs and championships. Like he was this pretty special player if we're talking about the greatest players we've ever seen. But yeah, 3/4 of a season in, De Marrée is up there, which speaks to how special he has been. All right, let me ask you this. What's the recipe for Madison? How do they win this game?
I think they had a good blueprint in the second regular season meeting they had against Minnesota. It finished 16-13. They kind of kept Minnesota from, just running out on them defensively. They really limited the overall possessions. Like I say, I think it's got to be a tight wire act. Like I don't think there's any scenarios out there where Madison's cruising away by 5. I think it's going to have to be 16-15, and they make sure that they're either winning or denying every end of quarter situation. They're not allowing Pollard to get a free score over the top or something, as they did when they played at Madison this season.
Or Bevon, or Raider, or Soufflo.
It's always somebody, right? Like it's kind of the Radicals' Achilles heel is these end of quarter scenarios. It's essentially, the monkey paw curling in on itself after so many seasons of success during their championship weekend runs when they would win end of quarters. Now it's like it just befuddles them a lot of times. So yeah, I think, Madison has to cross their T's and dot their I's. They've got to just play the fullest 4-quarter game that they've played all season. They have to play better than we've seen them in 2025 in order to pull this out. Because again, it's the reigning champ. It's Minnesota. Like they're a tough team in the playoffs. Again, playoffs, as we continue to kind of grow and understand more and more year to year, it's a different beast, as with any sport. And this single elimination and ability to game plan one off, it's not similar to anywhere else in Ultimate. You don't get elimination games by just playing an opponent once. And Minnesota knows that. And everyone learned it last year. And whether teams want to discount that or whatever, they can learn their lesson again. But Minnesota is going to be a tough team to take out in 2025.
Yeah, I like what the wind chill did, switching Thomas Shope over to offense for the Salt Lake game, and he played bits of offense before that. I mean, the way Ben Feldman described it to me is like, we just need a guy who's fast and can run, and like especially on a turn, like a guy that can get it back. But you saw that against the Shred. Like Thomas Shope was the one guy who kind of looked like he could play for the Shred in terms of just being like relentlessly fast, finding the open space, solid disc skills, making plays. And like we haven't seen that very much from him because he's mostly been a D-line guy and he's still just 19 years old. But it was impressive to watch Thomas do that, and I would expect him to be back on O for the wind chill on Saturday.
Well, and here is where one place Madison could attack Minnesota, and that the wind chill have been vulnerable, and that the Shred and the Union have both exposed. Transition. Minnesota is one of the older teams in the league, and it shows sometimes when there's just a lot of activity and a lot of back and forth. That July 4th matchup, it just felt like Chicago was running them out in the space. Madison is a younger team. They can kind of get that slingshot attack going defensively. If they can create more pressure in the lanes, which has not been something they've been good at against Minnesota, but if they can do it, Madison, I think, can take advantage in the counterattack. Because, outside of Shope, Minnesota offensively is a little bit more veteran heavy, and so can Minnesota contain the amount of mistakes that they make? I don't know. That's a big question for the wind chill. They've struggled the past 2 seasons with some of these games where they just let the bottom fall out a little bit offensively.
To close out this conversation, I set the line for DC New York. What's your line? How many points do the Radicals get?
4.5.
We're on the same page. I mean, my mind went to 4.5 or 5.5.
Because last year it was like double up, right? It was like 22-11 or something in the Central Division title game.
Yeah, they ran away with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can just picture, I mean, you and I both know Tim DeBile pretty well. I can picture him just being in such disgust. 5.5? Like, we're not going to lose
Oh,
by
yeah.
5.5.
I said 4.5, by the way. And last year
I
it was
know.
23-14 Minnesota in the Central Division championship game, for note.
Right. It was by far the most lopsided of the four division championship games a year ago. So yeah, one of these teams is going to face Chicago. Let's talk about the South. San Diego and Austin. I feel like the Growlers are in a really fortunate position, other than the fact that they have to do this travel from the West Coast to Texas, and then if they win, go back to the West Coast, and then go back to the East Coast to Atlanta. That's not ideal. But for San Diego, they're going into this game with a ton of confidence in my mind. They think they should have beat Austin when they played them in the regular season. Quite frankly, I think the Growlers should have beaten Austin when they played them in the regular season. The Soul made plays in the fourth. They stole the game. It was great. But this is not an Austin team that is clicking on all cylinders right now, Adam. I mean, there were a lot of red alarm fires in their performance this past Friday night against a Carolina team that, quote unquote, had nothing to play for. Austin got worked in that game. Najee said all the right things. Disappointing. We're going to bounce back. We won the fourth quarter. We kept on fighting. But
Right.
I just don't know with this Austin team, the injuries that they've had and, the mentality that they have. I mean, they did not a lot of games this year, they have not come out sharp, and that's their words, not mine. But yeah, I like San Diego. I think it's going to be close. I think it is like a 60-40 game, but I lean the Growlers' direction, assuming that Travis Dunn is healthy enough, because he hadn't played in several weeks. He tweaked his back. And, the Growlers with Travis Dunn and the Growlers without Travis Dunn are two very different things.
Yeah, I mean, San Diego and Colorado, to me, are the two biggest enigmas in the playoffs. I think that they're very unproven lineups as far as what they've done in the postseason. The Growlers, once upon a time, did win back-to-back West Division championships, but the players that are left over from that era are sparse. It's relatively a turned over roster, and I think that they have a lot of talent this year. You talk about outside of Travis Dunn, Khalif El-Salon has been fantastic for them. Daniel Brunker, KJ Koo, Marcel Osborne, Matt Miller. The rest of this offense is pretty interesting, especially given that they don't run a traditional two-handler set. It's kind of just Matt Miller out there anchoring a whole bunch of sort of hybrids. That Marcel Osborne has one of the highest touches, but he isn't anchoring in the backfield much. So I think San Diego has a really interesting attack. I just think, you talk about Austin's mental game. I think San Diego has the same thing to address. They've been close this year, but they did give up that lead against this Austin team at a pretty pivotal time in the season, and they lose close against Atlanta in the beginning month of the season. And I think those are great games that we can see the potential for this Growlers team, but they haven't really closed it against a good team. And Austin's still a good team playing at home. And so, yeah, I think that there's equal questions for the Growlers. Can they go on the road and win a game that, given the strengths of these lineups, when you look at the active rosters, I would agree with you. I think that they should win. but Austin can punch up. I still just think, Hankies in a playoff game could be a force that propels the Soul across the finish line. I mean, I know that they have a lot of questions. I agree with you. I think what was so disheartening about the Soul's week 13 performance is that their defense collapsed. The Jackson Potts injury is something that they're not going to overcome on offense, but with Mark Henke becoming this kind of superstar over the last month, it felt like they could sort of weather some of that. But this last week, when they were just surrendering deep ball after deep ball to the Flyers attack, it's like, oh, this is not good for the future. So, yeah, I know I'm getting into ramble mode, but I think both teams, this is one of the most interesting matchups to me in the first round. I know we say New York DC is probably the most anticipated, but this San Diego Soul matchup to me is a pretty much toss up. Like I don't know who I favor, given that I don't have a whole bunch of data on how either of these teams perform in the playoffs. Growlers are making their first postseason appearance since 2022, and the Soul overturned half their roster coming into this season.
The weird thing about this game that you're kind of alluding to, but I'll say it explicitly, not that you did anything wrong, is that I think Austin is probably 1.5 favorite, 1.5 goal favorite. Maybe it's close to a pick 'em, but it's close. The Carolina Flyers would be 2.5 to 3.5 goal favorites against either of these teams if they were in this game instead, which is why
Easily.
I think it feels weird.
Yes.
But San Diego won at Carolina. So they played an awesome game. It was a Flyers team that was, week 5 of the season, college nationals weekend. And Carolina played a pretty good game that night too. San Diego, had 12 turnovers for that game, and it went to double OT. And I still think back, Carolina received on Universe Point in that game. And Carolina was also up 1, and San Diego scored at the buzzer, either of regulation or overtime, on like a cross-field shot to a totally wide open guy, like just a blown defensive assignment at the buzzer. And, San Diego had the disc. It looked like Jacob Fairfax had a layout block underneath, but the official called a foul. And then I think Stefan Samu caught the game-winning goal, and that was that. And San Diego got that win on that Friday night over Carolina, and that's why the Growlers are here and the Flyers are not. And why are the Soul here? A lot of it has to do with their schedule. Austin's best win of the year is probably at San Diego. And
Yep.
the Soul have played good halves in other games. I wish their game against Atlanta had been more than a half. Because if you think about it, if we do get Austin, Atlanta, they've only played 2 quarters of Ultimate all year as division rivals. So
far, Evan, so far.
Yeah, so far. Yeah. So I think that's what's weird about this is the Flyers cast a shadow over these two teams, and yet it's an incredible opportunity, particularly with the history, because Austin 2 years ago shocked the world and won a playoff game in Atlanta. So if they win, they're going to go to Atlanta with a lot of belief. I feel like San Diego also is going to go to Atlanta if they win with a lot of belief. They came back against Atlanta in the fourth quarter, got beaten at the buzzer. They played a really good game on the second night of a back-to-back, remember, after they had after they had beaten Carolina. They had just 12 turnovers the next night. And Atlanta had one of their single-digit turnover games and was a little bit better. But I think this Growler team, aside from their games against the Spiders, have played well against the best teams that they've played. Now, I don't know how much stock to put into those 2 games against the Spiders. Certainly the first one, the Growlers would admit, was just not their best execution day. I'll be honest, I didn't see a ton of this past Saturday's game. I know that Oakland got off to a pretty good start, and it was a more important game for Oakland because they were trying to clinch home field, and they did. Growlers kept it within close in a relatively low-scoring game. One thing that jumps out at me, in a 3-goal loss, San Diego had 6 red zone turnovers on Saturday against the Spiders. San Diego's not going to win at Austin if they have 6 red zone turns this week.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to that question you had earlier about Travis Dunn's health. When Travis Dunn is in the lineup, I feel like he adds 5 or 6 percentage points to the red zone conversion number. Like, that's just how good and important he is to this team at that part of the field. And, you know, when they get to combo him and put him with a battery of, like, Khalif or Matt Miller, and especially if he is coming back a little bit from an injury, and they can be the runner, they can be kind of the rabbit that sets the pace. I mean, that's a huge bonus for them. So yeah, you know, I think that this is going to be a really good matchup. But I want to transition to the West Division game because I think that is also just a great matchup and one to close out the night with a lot of highlights, which is
Yes, sir.
Summit at Oakland. Summit did win the only meeting prior between these two teams. It was the Tobias Brooks Summit debut where he went off for like 900 total yards, 700 throwing yards, just ridiculous video game numbers.
I thought it was 9,000. I think you're missing a 0.
I might be. But in this matchup against this particular Oakland team, I favor the Spiders, especially with just how they're playing lately. I've really been impressed by their defense, which is, I think, the question I had after their fantastic start to the season when they started 5-0 and their offense was playing like the best unit in the league. Still have a lot of faith in them on that side of the disc. You know, I still feel like they're a top 5 unit. Defensively is what I've been wanting to see more from. And with, Robin Vickers-Batsdorf back in the lineup, with Max Williams playing pretty well in the deep space and being a nice canopy for this team, there's a lot of athleticism. There's getting to be more buy-in, and there's pretty good results for the Oakland team defensively. And with the inconsistencies we've seen from Colorado on offense, I worry about them on the road. And I think generally you can just say that about the Summit, right, Evan? It's not a big secret. I worry about the Colorado Summit on the road. What are they going to look like? And I think especially defensively against good competition, there's some questions for Colorado. They have some pretty impressive team stats, but they've really bulked that up against the Bighorns and the Steel in their division. I think that they're going to have to prove themselves on the road against this Oakland offense, which is just going to be high flying with Leo Gordon, Adam Reese, Raekwon Atkins, and Walker Frankenberg all active.
Yeah. I think this Colorado team has big names. It has veterans. It has guys that have won championships and played well in big playoff games in this league. They've got really good young talent, guys that are future stars or current stars, and Brooks and Thorson and Mint Fink. And yet, there's something missing to this Colorado team. And, externally, they spout all the belief that you would expect them to. I'm not so sure that they are so sure about themselves internally, deep down. And I think, look, it's reasonable. Like, their team is different from what they expected it to be. Primarily Alex Atkins, who's listed as questionable. I meant to text him and ask if he was going to play. I haven't done that. So I'm not sure whether Kins is in or out. I'm not sure. Like, he's such a wild card. Like, he could win the game for them or he could lose the game for them if he's out there. Obviously, he's a guy that if he's healthy and capable, you want him in the game. But he also has not played a UFA game since May 24th. Tomorrow, or, when this podcast goes up, it's July 24th. So that was 2 months ago that he last played a game. He's only played 4 games this year. It's unfortunate that, the two guys that we think about most when it comes to the Spiders, Feiner and Atkins. Feiner hampered by an injury last year, Atkins hampered by an injury this year. And those two guys are kind of, just two, like, they have other heart and soul pieces too. I mean, they also lost Jay Frood to a season-ending hand injury in the Vegas game. So no Jay Frood this week. Jay's had a great career. He's still a good player. Interestingly, Jeremy Knopf is listed as out. He's one of their guys that played in all 7 games, or in all 12 games, one of the 7 guys that played in every game, and he might get left off the playoff roster. If Atkins plays, we'll see. That has happened before in the league, by the way. I remember back in 2015, and I remember this really well because Michael Zoe, guy they called Jenga, I drove with him to the very first Flyers tryout. He made the team. He played in all 12 regular season games, and then he didn't play in the semis at championship weekend. And I was like, how do you feel about that? And he's like, I trust an artist. So, I imagine it's a similar vibe here. But that's weird, right? To play in all 12 regular season games and then not to make the playoff roster. If that's the case, I'm circling a bunch of different wagons here. My point is the Colorado Summit have had so many ups and downs. And the only thing that's consistent about them is that they've been inconsistent. And do I trust them to win a playoff game on the road? Absolutely not. Are they capable of getting hot and winning this game and beating Salt Lake and going to championship weekend? Their talent absolutely has that ceiling. But they are a high variance team, and I just don't believe strongly enough in them when I look at Oakland's roster and think about how the Spiders have played at home this year. But, there are similar reservations I could raise about Oakland. So let me hit the pause button there and let you react to what I've just thrown out there, which I know is a lot.
I think I hear you along the lines of this Colorado team kind of lacks one of their centerpieces every season, but there's a lot of teams that are still in contention that could say similar things about their roster. I mean, I think top of the list, obviously, with New York and like Calvin Brown, Austin with Jackson Potts, et cetera, et cetera. But like, that's kind of the point that I can't get past with Colorado is that there's still plenty of talent up and down this roster, and yet it doesn't feel like it leads to greater outcomes for them. They still kind of can't necessarily get some of the wins that they want. I mean, I know that they beat the Spiders in their only matchup this season, but that was at home. It was in the, debut games for all the Mama Bird guys coming onto the roster in 2025, kind of a really resurgent point. This is a much more head-to-head battle, and that's always been the problem for this Summit team is that when they're not just like coasting on momentum, when they're just kind of in the trenches matched up, you don't always see them leverage that talent into wins, right? It's kind of why they're staggered behind Salt Lake in that rivalry. They came out in 2022, sort of own the edge, and since then it's been a lot of shred wins. I think that Oakland has the kind of togetherness and intensity is that they've displayed throughout the season that's going to be an obstacle for the Summit. Again, like you're probably going to look at the box score and be really impressed with a number of individuals on the Summit as any given week shows. I think that they're a very stat friendly team in terms of their individual stars, but you say stuff like they leave Jeremy Knopf off of the playoff rotation. That's a big question. Why? Like that is specifically the kind of player and the piece that has traditionally eluded this team. And so, why this matchup then that you're going to pull sort of the glue guy? I'm not in the sideline. I'm not a coach very specifically, but it's just sort of the question of there always seems to be a moving piece with the Summit. There's no real like sense of why that might be happening. And I think that is itself a description of what goes on because you look at it, kind of on the opposite end of the coaching spectrum with like New York, why they're making roster adjustments in a given direction. There's a very clear sort of game plan and system as to why a specific player is being used in the rotation a certain way. With Colorado, I think, even to the point of why is Tobias Brooks in the backfield so much? Why is he touching the disc 60 times a game? It's the same thing that was almost happening with Atkins. Why is one of your best downfield players completely around the disc? It's just, I don't know. There's questions for Colorado that I think they either answer this weekend or we continue to go into next season wondering about that have plagued this team for a couple of years,
Yeah, I talked about that a little bit with Toner at the end of the Salt Lake, Colorado game.
And what was the record that they've had over their last like 34 games compared to their first 34? You had that stat at the end of the Salt Lake game, I believe, where they were like, 20-5 in their first 20 games as a franchise, but since they've been like 15-14.
Let me find it. They were 17-2 to start their first 19 games through their 5-0 start
Uh-huh.
in 23, and now they're 16-15 in their last 31. I believe they were 15-15 in the last 30 before the win over Seattle. Actually that's now 17-15 because they beat Vegas in there too. But yeah, I mean 17-2 to 17-15. That's where they're at.
And it's almost like you look at the roster and you're still like, well, it's still kind of most of the at least in a talent sense, like the Summit team that was succeeding. I know that they lack Cody Spicer and others, but this is still a really likable team. I mean, I feel like we go into every season saying this is a top 10 team, clearly.
Yeah, I mean they've never really replaced Cody Spicer, and like that's a tough guy to
Well,
replace.
you can't. You can't. You can't
And
replace Spicer. I
they've
understand that.
they've also never replaced Jonathan Nethercutt, and that's
Is
kind of
that
the answer to
also
the
the Spicer
question.
timeline? By the way, is that just the Spicer timeline too, that record, essentially?
I mean Spicer played in 23 when they kind of nosedived and lost in the playoffs to the Aviators,
He
that
did.
Lucas
He did.
Ambrose game.
He did.
But yeah, can I shift the conversation to Oakland for a second? Because
Absolutely.
so I think one of Oakland's most important players, had 1 goal and 2 assists during the regular season. And he's an offensive guy. And that's Raquan Atkins, who's young and fast and athletic and dynamic and played in the first game of the year against New York and played in their last game of the year against San Diego. And in between, he was playing for the University of Oregon, helped them get to the semis, was playing for U24 USA, won gold, and now he's back. And like, we spent a lot of time talking about Tobias Brooks for good reason, but like Raquan Atkins is right there in terms of being a special young player. And, I would not be surprised if after having 3 scores in 2 regular season games, he has 9 scores and is an unstoppable force in this game. Now, that's not saying that they're going to lean on him because this is a team that leans on their core 4 offensive dudes. Evan Magsig in the backfield, Adam Reese, Walker Frankenberg, and Leo Gordon initiating from downfield. But Raquan Atkins is just another dude. They added Dylan Whited back into the lineup. Saul Waldowski has been like a super steady glue guy, underrated as well. Yeah, I like what I see from this Oakland team. You mentioned Vickers Batzdorf coming back. He adds a lot to their defense. Dan Riddaller has kind of been one of
Yeah.
the sneaky unsung heroes for them throughout the season too.
Rosenthal,
13 goals,
too.
13 assists, 10 blocks. Yeah, Rosenthal, like every game, it feels like he's got multiple blocks. So, man, yeah,
One
Rosenthal's had
other
a good
player
year.
that deserves a shout out on their offense, Jason Valley. And it goes back to
Right.
the point, I think, around what you're saying around Adkins. When this starting lineup is at full strength, is it the fastest in the league? I mean, you talk about Frankenberg, Adkins, Reese, Gordon, Valley as a handler. I don't know that too many teams can stay in front of the Spiders when they get fully going. I mean, Salt Lake is a team that comes to mind, but they're a
Yeah.
real fast offense.
Salt Lake was the first team that came to my mind, too, with the Jorgesens and Selfridge and Kerr and Miller and Dunabile. They're pretty quick.
And yet
But,
they don't, they're all good. I don't know that they have a player the caliber of Adam Reese on that unit. I mean, Salt Lake's been terrific this year. Reese, when he gets it going, I mean, he had a play this last weekend where he started a cut at the 20 and he didn't finish it until he went into the end zone. And he kind of went every other as he went without losing tempo. And he's just a player that when he gets hot, I don't know that Colorado has a defender to slow him down. And I think that even happened in their first meeting. Reese was still just torching them in deep space throughout that game.
yeah. So what's the line for this game? This is your turn to make the line.
Oh, I still think it's something like you know, 2 for Colorado. I like a -2 on Oakland. I think Oakland is a slight favorite, but I don't necessarily think that they'll just close out against the Summit. I still think this Summit team has enough to play for, and it'll be interesting to see if they can adopt that underdog mindset correctly, because it's just, I don't know, like, when is the last time we've seen Colorado have a really convincing underdog win as like a slight not favorite?
I mean, it's when they beat Salt Lake. It's when they beat Salt Lake coming from behind to do it in that game that, like, the shred all of a sudden,
Sure,
like, we're up by 5. Let's just huck it deep and give them the disc. And it got away from
sure.
Salt Lake, and Atkins was
2024.
spiking, and Rusnagel
Sure.
was trying to
Okay.
attack him. And yeah, but it's a good point that you make, because, like, I mean, even that could have been a springboard for the Summit. And it wasn't. They still lost to Seattle next week or something like that. They lost to
Yep.
Madison and Minnesota next week, whatever it was. So
Yep.
yeah, it's I feel like Atkins swings the line by a point. I feel like it's 2.5.
Which
Oakland by
direction,
2.5. I feel like it's Oakland by 2.5 if Atkins is out. I feel like it's Oakland by 1.5 if Atkins is in. And I think I would hedge the middle, because I think Oakland's going to win, but I also think, like, this game is going to be crazy. There's going to be absurd stuff that happens in the fourth quarter and in overtime in this game if it gets there. I think this is going to be the weirdest game of the weekend, the weirdest West Division game that we've come to expect. And I think Oakland wins, but I think it's going to be crazy close, and I think it's going to be a game that is not decided until there's literally no time left.
I've got a theory for you, because I know you're a college football head, and I was saying this to somebody else the other week, but like West Division games, especially after a night like this, they kind of have that punch drunk flavor of like a Pac-12 game or something, where it can be like a 50 to 55 shootout. You're in like 5 overtimes. I agree with you. I feel like this game could set up for that, where we might get the double overtime finish out of Summit and Spiders. I know you were asking for it in the toss with the Empire DC game, but see, I do read it. I do read it.
Well, you just bring up the Pac-12. I'm wondering how many current Pac-12 teams you can name.
None. I probably couldn't. Is
You
like,
can't name the 2 remaining teams?
is USC still in there?
God, no. They're Big Ten.
No. Yeah, I know.
Oregon
I know
State
my
and
big.
Washington State are still there. They were the only 2 members of the
Don't
Pac-12
do this
last
to me,
year.
Evan. They're fake divisions. That's what college ruined. They ruined the real divisions. Lest we learn that lesson,
True. Next year, Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, Colorado State, Utah State, and Texas State are joining, and Gonzaga will join for basketball. But yeah, your point is a good one. Pac-12 after dark. It's a thing from the last several decades of our lives where, there's that one game that's still going on at 2 a.m. Eastern, and it's just like, what is going on in this Fresno State Cal game right now? Like, it's
Yep.
50 to 47, and there's 10 minutes to go. Yeah, it's a fair point. I think, this game, frankly, might be too early to be Pac-12 after dark, because it's a 6 o'clock West Coast start, so it's only 9
It
Eastern.
is.
We need
I
like a
know.
7:30 local time start to have, it go to 1 a.m. But
Yep.
yeah, so you lean Spiders in this game?
I do. I still think Oakland is a pretty good team to make championship weekend. I like them a lot. That game that they began the season with against New York is still one of the more impressive performances of the year. I did not have them favored in that game, and they completely turned around my opinion on that franchise. So I just think they're playing from a position of power. I know that Oakland hasn't won a playoff game in a long time, but this feels like the Spiders seem to do it. And then once they have a bit of momentum, I mean, we've said it throughout the season, like, they look like a top 5 team when they're hitting their stride, but again, Colorado could also shut me up too. I mean, there's enough talent on the Summit team to put something together on the road. Especially
Let
if
me
Atkins
ask you
is
one
involved.
final question, and then we'll wrap it up. Which team that's playing this weekend is most likely to be at championship weekend a month from now?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask that. Oof. I mean, I feel like it's the winner of the East Division game just because that division is so topsy-turvy. So I'll say DC because I have them as just the slightest nose favorites over New York at home. Yeah, I'll go with DC for now. You know, I picked a bunch
Just
of their
dripping
guys.
disrespect to the glory.
I mean, DC just swept the regular season series. I don't know how much disrespect I'm applying versus just the real world reality for Boston and their matchups against the Breeze. But you know,
They won the season series 2-1. Remember back
2-1.
in May,
Sorry, yeah,
Boston got a win.
There was the original game at
No,
DC.
I'm just giving you a hard
apologize.
time. That would have been my
No, I
answer
know.
too. That would have been my answer
Oakland
too.
would be second, but again, how do you disagree with the Shred on their 11-game winning streak right now?
Yeah, they have a hunger to them as well. Now the Shred still can have moments like they did in the second quarter against Minnesota, where it was just like, all right, what's going on here? Like, this offense isn't supposed to look like this. But they calibrated, and obviously they won that game by multiple goals. So that's, a little tiny red flag with the Shred, but they have won 11 in a row. I think they are the favorites for sure against either Oakland or Colorado. I mean, they're 4-0 against those teams this year. With that said, we'll talk about this a couple weeks from now more in depth. Salt Lake was down in the fourth quarter with 2 minutes to go at Oakland. And just like I feel like San Diego should have beaten Austin, I feel like Oakland should have beaten Salt Lake, and the Shred stole that game. So, if they do, then it's a different conversation. But, yeah, excited for this weekend.
Let's not count our chickens before they hatch, All these games still have to be played. And again, as 2025 has showed us, that's where the real proof is. As much as we can have a favorite going into any of these matchups, we could still be seeing a lot of upsets, I feel like, in the first round.
And DC did go 2-1 against Boston, but they went 0-2 against Philly and 1-3 against Philly and Montreal. So DC is an interesting team. Which DC team is going to show up here in the playoffs? I mean, you could ask that question for all 8 teams that are playing this weekend, I guess, because teams have different identities and different moments, and they're all human, and that's what the great thing about sports is. And how will guys handle the pressure in 4 quarters of Elimination Ultimate? We will find out.
Games begin on Saturday night, July 26th at 7 p.m. Eastern on Watch UFA TV. That'll do it for Evan and I here and now, but Evan will be in Minnesota broadcasting the Central Division first round matchup between the Radicals and Windchill. The other 3 games will also be all available live, and we'll be tuning in alongside you. That'll do it for us now, but remember, Frisbee forever. Bye, guys.